I've noted with great interest the Green New Deal.
It looks like Mitch McConnell will be putting it to a vote soon in the Senate. But what is the Green New Deal? What's really in it?
Today is the day that we truly embark on a comprehensive agenda of economic, social, and racial justice in the United States of America.
The Green New Deal resolution was proposed in February by U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Once released, it caused conservative talking heads to explode almost immediately.
Eliminate all fossil fuels, all of them.
And to promote economic and environmental justice and equality. Excuse me?
This is a real serious threat to our way of life.
It's the weaponization of climate.
Free housing, free college education, free universal health care.
We'll be living back in the Stone Age.
Government-forced veganism.
A smorgasbord of all things socialist.
Part 1. So what is the Green New Deal? The Green New Deal is a statement of climate reality and progressive principles based on FDR's original New Deal of the 1930s. Like the original New Deal, the Green New Deal addresses economic inequality head-on and also tackles the greatest threat of the times, which during the Great Depression was banking failure, but today is climate change. The first 3 pages of the 14-page resolution establish the magnitude of the crisis we face regarding climate change, inequality, and how the two are related. The scale of the problem, it says, requires a national mobilization not seen since World War II. The goals of the Green New Deal resolution are environmental, but they're also social and economic. The environmental goals start with net zero emissions in 10 years. Net zero to allow for things like carbon sequestration. So fossil fuels won't be banned at the end of 10 years, but you'd have to make up for the carbon emitted in another way. The 10-year window was chosen because that's the amount of time scientists are telling us that we have left to keep global warming below the critical threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius. It strives to improve the energy and water efficiency of all buildings in the US, and to reduce emissions from the agricultural and transportation sectors, quote, as much as technologically feasible. Striving to reduce emissions, though, is not the same as government-enforced veganism, and I hope everyone knew that. The resolution also talks about securing healthy food for everyone, protecting clean air and clean water, and restoring natural ecosystems. On the other side, the Green New Deal's social and economic goals include job training and education for all, including higher education, a job guarantee at a family-sustaining wage with paid vacations and medical leave, ensuring that the public receives appropriate ownership stakes in this program and access to capital through community and public banks, setting trade policy to include strong environmental and labor protections, and to grow domestic industry. The promotion of justice and equality by repairing current and historical oppression, protecting small business from monopoly, and ensuring that all of this is done through, quote, democratic and participatory processes led by frontline and vulnerable communities at the local level. So that's the Green New Deal. Wow, that's a lot of stuff. Part 2. Is the Green New Deal socialism? It may be helpful to first take a look at why the Green New Deal has social or economic components to it at all. Why not focus solely on the climate to make it easier to pass through Congress? Let's listen to AOC herself and then economist Pavlina Chernova, who provided research to AOC on the jobs guarantee.
What do you think the best case is to conservative voters, in more rural areas? They see what's happened in France, and it seems like it impacts the middle to lower middle class more.
We've allowed corporations to take over who bears the burden of carbon taxes and other taxes. And that's why when we work as a progressive movement here, it needs to be led by everyday people. It needs to be led by workers. It needs to be led by frontline communities, because if we don't do that, that is what happens.
Talk a little bit about what something like a jobs guarantee is doing in the Green New Deal. Why aren't climate change and employment two separate issues?
Climate threats cannot be separated from other forms of insecurity that people experience in their daily lives. That is economic insecurity. So basically, environmental policy to tackle climate change is essentially economic policy. If you have lost your fossil fuel job, so to speak, and you have not yet been incorporated into the green sector. We will ensure that transition for you.
My takeaway here is that we can't fully address climate without it being a collective effort. We all need to be on board with the solutions, or even if passed through Congress, climate policy may not last. Just like the gas tax in France was basically vetoed by the people. For the Green New Deal to be successful, it must focus on the needs of regular people. It will cause profound economic changes, and people employed right now in the fossil fuel industry will lose their jobs. We have a responsibility to coal communities and others on the climate front lines to make sure we don't forget about them in this transition. So is the Green New Deal socialism? Socialism is a word that means different things to different people, but yes, in some ways the Green New Deal can be considered a move towards socialism. In her book, This Changes Everything, author Naomi Klein argues that the individualist and extractivist mentality behind capitalism may be fundamentally at odds with humanity's survival.
Why is capitalism the enemy?
Well, this very brutal form of capitalism, which holds that we need to deregulate our economy, privatize our economy, cut back the public sphere, is fundamentally at odds with what we need to do to respond to climate change, because it is the essence of a collective crisis. So we can't just respond through individual shopping decisions.
To fight climate change, we're gonna need a new economic model, so I can understand why some people are calling the Green New Deal socialist. On the other hand, the Green New Deal doesn't call for sole public ownership of the means of production, so technically speaking, it's not really socialist. It's only socialist in the way that Denmark and Norway are, who have an economic system which is still mostly capitalist and should probably be called social democracy instead of democratic socialism if we're being technical. Part 3. Will the Green New Deal save humanity from climate change? I hope that everyone watching this video recognizes that climate change is real, it's caused by humans, and it's an existential threat. But can we do anything about it?
There's nothing we can do here in the U.S. to address that issue. We're not the polluters of the world, it's other countries.
Historically, we actually have been the polluters of the world, and we owe it to developing countries to clean up our act. The US is still number 1 in total emissions, but it's true that China is catching up fast. In this graph, you can see that the US was number 1 in greenhouse gas emissions in 1990, but China leapfrogged past us and the EU around the turn of the millennium in terms of emissions per year. Why did that happen? It's a side effect of globalization. US manufacturing started leaving for China and Southeast Asia in the 90s. And now they produce most of our stuff. So they're also left holding the bag in terms of pollution. This is why the Green New Deal includes a section on trade policy, which is what I'm calling eco-protectionism in the graphic. The US can't stop all climate emissions on our own, but we can craft new trade policies and use our leverage in trade and climate negotiations. If we do this, I believe that other countries will follow our leadership towards a greener future. If we enthusiastically adopt the Green New Deal after the 2020 election and use our full leverage in negotiations with other countries, I do think that this may be enough to save us from the worst effects of climate change. I'm not at all confident that a less comprehensive approach has much of a chance anymore. The crisis is looming in front of us and we've got to dream big. We owe it to ourselves and to our children to try to accomplish what's necessary to achieve a better world.
What you are talking about, just big picture, is a radical agenda compared to the way politics is done right now.
Well, I think that it only has ever been radicals that have changed this country. Abraham Lincoln made the radical decision to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. Franklin Delano Roosevelt made the radical decision to embark on establishing programs like Social Security. That is radical.
Do you call yourself a radical?
Yeah, if that's what radical means, call me a radical.
Thanks for watching.
This is our first step to define the problem and define the scope of the solution. We choose to assert ourselves as a global leader in transitioning to 100% renewable energy. We should do it because we are an example to the world.